Jordan, welcome to Where the Climate Things Are. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, lovely to be part of the show.
As you know, we're big POW fans over here, and I know that you work at POW, and we'll find out a little bit more about what you do and your role. But first, I wanted to just have you, if you would, introduce yourself to the audience in whatever way that feels good to you today.
Yeah, absolutely. So, how would I describe myself? So, I'd say I'm a strategic communicator, campaign leader, creative storyteller. Currently working at the intersection of climate, community, and culture. I'm based in Wales in the UK and working remotely, as you said, from the Protect Our Winters team in Europe. My role within the team, I lead on all the communications and all the campaigns. Previous to this, I have over 10 years experience working as a brand and creative designer. And it wasn't until I did my master's degree in international innovation design, which actually gave me the permission to follow my curiosity into how we can turn complex environmental issues into compelling narratives. And I think since then, it's helped drive my action through the campaigns, brand partnerships, any thought leadership. And I'd say that, yeah, my superpower would probably be bringing clarity, consistency, creativity to organizations that are committed to protecting the people and the planet.
I love that. I love the superpower piece. That's so good. Wonderful. And yeah, I mean, we can dive into so much of this because I'm super curious about many of the things you just said. But I did want to, I start with this question with every guest, and I was curious how this manifested for you. But what was your aha moment on climate or environment? Like, what kind of woke you up to this topic? And it could be in a good way or a bad way, like whatever you want to take that to. But yeah, what was your aha moment on climate, would you say?
Just before I go into that, is my video quality okay for you?
Yeah, no, it is. It just got really on. Me neither. That's so funny. I was like, I'm hoping that this is because then it will correct itself. And okay, let me see if. Yeah, it's really strange. It will kind of do. This is like a funny one because it wasn't happening before we recorded.
No, literally just since the recording. Every time I move, it goes really pixelated.
Yeah, that is so funny. I've never had that before. Let me see.
I'm on Chrome. I don't know if that makes a difference.
No, I'm on Chrome too. Huh. Yeah, that is funny. Is it doing it on my side when I move?
No, you are completely clear.
Yeah, that's so funny. It is happening for me too. And sometimes, sometimes I feel like when I have done these before, like I don't know if you can see like the percentage uploading in the corner. Yeah. Okay. So when we first started, it was like going only, it takes a couple, a few seconds to get up to 99% or whatever. But there was one guest we had where it was stuck at 50% or something. And this similar thing was happening, but I'm seeing it at 99%. So I think it's quite smooth there. That is really funny. If it becomes distracting, we can always turn off.
No. It's definitely not distracting. Just hoping that it's not.
I know.
Recording.
I think
this.
You know what I've seen. So I've honestly seen Riverside has been better about this. We used to record on a different platform for my other podcast, Trailhead, and we would have all sorts of glitches and all these things happen, and then I'd get the recording back, and it'd be completely fine. So it never really made sense. But yeah, I think I'm fine to keep going. I think my sense is that the actual video will be fine. But yeah, I was thinking, I
was I just better check. Maybe it's
No, I'm so glad you checked. I was actually at one point going to check too, but and then I asked the question and forgot to check because I was so excited to ask you the question. But no, I wanted to have you introduce and everything, but I'm glad you stopped because I wonder, it is weird. It's when you're still.
When I'm still, but don't I stop doing something.
But I don't want you to don't want you to measure yourself or change any movements or anything. Because as you can see, I'm a very.
You're center for me. So I'm just going to keep looking at you and not myself.
Okay. Amazing. Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, that's the other thing. Okay. So I think the other thing I was going to say, I mean, I'm going to keep you on my screen because I want to like see you, even if it's pixelated. The layout though, there is a layout button on the right side of the screen. Can you see that? That I think can also, I don't know if I just changed that around a little bit for me to sort of see if that would help anything, but I don't think it, I think it doesn't change the quality of the video, but if for whatever reason you want, well, one of them says speaker full screen, which I think
I've got it
for
on
me
split
makes
now.
you full screen.
Made you bigger. So that's better.
Okay. Well, whatever is best for you. I'm going to keep you as like bigger on my side because I, obviously, but if it gets distracting, what I'm saying is we can also turn video off, but let's see what we can do for now. And like, let's see if we can get through it. And then, but that's so funny. I'm glad you stopped because I was like, what is that? This is so interesting that this is happening. But I was like, I think it's probably my side. And then I was looking at my Wi-Fi and I was like, it seems like it's fine. So anyways,
let's go with it. We'll see at the end. Cool. Worst case, we redo, but I'm sure, like you said,
I think it's going to be fine. Yeah. And again, I just like, I post like the video conversation on YouTube, but it's honestly more for SEO because I have like 2 YouTube followers or something. But the one thing is just, I'll just do like the reel. And if we don't get that, it's not the end of the world. I'll just like, we can talk about that. Okay. I think if we want to just go from me like asking you the question, then we can pretend like I just asked you that, and then we can go from there.
Okay.
Okay, I'll ask it again. What was your? No.
I thought you were asking the question again. I didn't know I was going straight in.
Okay, I'll ask it again. That is weird to go straight in. Okay. What was your aha moment on climate?
So I actually grew up in Oxford, which is a city in England. You might know of it. Some of the Harry Potter movies were filmed there.
Sure.
So yeah, I was born in Oxford, grew up in Oxford, and every summer I used to visit my aunt and uncle that lived in West Wales with my sister. So we used to have, the best time, best adventures, surfing, coast steering, rock climbing, coming back at the end of every summer and saying to our parents, we just want to live in Wales. We have so much fun. Like our parents had to remind us that if we lived there, we would have to go to school. Like we wouldn't just be surfing every single day. But anyway, we convinced them. So at the age of 14, I'm the eldest of, I've got 3 sisters. My parents moved us all the way to West Wales, which is about 4.5 hours west. And that sort of started my journey because, Oxford is quite a large city, relatively landlocked. Moving to the coast was a completely different change of environment for me. And it just started my journey on how beautiful the planet is. It opened my eyes on how much more we could be doing on an individual level to protect it. Being so close to nature and seeing it firsthand ultimately. So then, gosh, I think, I'm not sure how old, maybe my early 20s, I then became a regional rep for Surfers Against Sewage, which is a marine conservation charity working with communities to protect the oceans, waves, beaches, marine life. It started in 1990 by a group of surfers from Cornwall. And as part of being a rep, I would, it was all voluntary, by the way. I had to take part and organize beach cleans, talks, do interviews with like TV, radio, news, as well as carrying out our annual rep training. So I'd probably say that shift, that move to the coast was huge for me. And then kind of taking that step forward into charity work would probably be an aha moment.
Yeah. That is so cool that was it like a unanimous sister-wide decision to be like, Mom and Dad, we love Wales. Like we want to move. It was like the 4 of you were like, we all love it so much. Let's go. And
Well, it's
they were
only
like,
actually, so there's 3 years between myself and then my next sister. We're all girls, by the way.
Yeah.
And
Amazing.
yeah, so it was us two that used to go around, because then my next two sisters, who are twins, they're 8 years younger than me. So yeah, so it was, we used to come
more
back
the older.
Yeah, and I think the twins were just like, yeah, that sounds fun.
Sure, yeah.
Let's do that. Let's go somewhere where we can do activities every day. So yeah.
I love it. That's so cool. I mean, I have actually exactly the same breakdown without the twins. So I'm the oldest, 3 years between myself and my sister. And then we have 8 from between me and my youngest brother or younger brother, 8 years. So it's just the 3 of us. But it's funny how, I think growing up, my sister and I were both like, Cam, we want to do this, right? And he'd be like, okay, sure. And we were like, yeah. Like, just come with us. Like, it's fine. But I love that you, exactly. I love though that I love this, because it's like, it's so cool to hear about how, again, like this really came from your own love of, and your sister's love of, like, being near the coast, being around nature. But also I love the piece where your parents were like, wait, but by the way, you're not going to always be on vacation. Like, you'll actually have to like do like live life and go to school, which is a really important reminder and distinction. Cause I think I would have also been like, oh, but wait, we can't just be on vacation all the time. Like, it's not always summer.
We have to do the other things.
Yeah. It's funny because
we can't go to the beach every day. So
exactly. I was going to say, it's funny because I'm from Maine in the US, and I think by the way, I think it must be said, we talked about this already. I think you're my first European guest on the show, which is very exciting. So I'm excited to dive into like some of the differences between the US, maybe activism space, and Europe activism space. But quickly, I was going to say, I'm from Maine in the US. Very similar, like our literal, I think, slogan or state, something like motto is different from whatever we're called, but we have like, our state is literally called Vacation Land, which is funny because it's quite cold in the winter, right? But maybe this is similar to Wales. It's like the summer is sort of, I mean, I'm super biased, but it's like perfection. It's so beautiful, right? It's like it's the best place to be. But it is funny because I grew up just going to school, going through 9 months of winter that was like horrendous. And then I actually love the winter there, but I'm, again, very, very biased, but it's very, very cold, very icy, very tough. And then you kind of emerge into summer and everyone comes, like all the tourists arrive, and you're like, wait, this is like, no, not fair. Like, you guys don't have to experience sort of the, like, the rest of the year, or even going to school or anything like that. Like, everybody that just came to visit were sort of like, like that was their vacation. Literally called Vacation Land.
So Pembrokeshire, where I'm based, it's very similar to Cornwall, but it's definitely less trodden. So if you go down to Cornwall in the summer, it is so round, so many people. You get stuck in traffic going all the way down there, whereas Pembrokeshire is a lot quieter.
Interesting. Yeah. Which is, and that's, so you've stayed, I mean, you moved when you were like younger, and then you've stayed there into your adult life. Seems like, is there, I'm so curious, like, too, I mean, this is my own lack of knowledge about, I don't think I've ever been to Wales, which now I need to go because it sounds incredible. But it sounds like there's quite a bit of outdoor recreation there as well. Like, is that kind of, I mean, do you still surf? Like, is it like hiking? What is sort of your like outdoor buffet, outdoor sports of choice?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. It's, a selection. So we're about 10 miles from the nearest surf beach. We've also got one of the most beautiful national coast paths, which is 186 miles.
Cool.
So absolute sport for choice. And there's such a variety of stunning and varied coastal scenery. So it's the kind of place that makes you want to be out all the time. So for me, I tend to, when I'm not working at my laptop, usually surfing, trail running, swimming, whether or not that's in the sea or in the pool. I spent many, many years as a lifeguard. So definitely love the water. Mountain biking, and actually most recently, Skateboarding has been added into the mix.
Cool. Nice.
Yeah. So yeah,
are there good resources there for that, like skate parks and stuff, or is it like
a pretty good skate park in our local town? And again, it's never that busy. It's we're very lucky. Maybe I shouldn't be airing this because everyone's gonna come to Pembrokeshire, but we're very spoiled for choice. The weather can be tough, like you said, similar to what you've experienced in Maine. We get very, very wet winters. The shoulder seasons are beautiful. They're definitely my favorite, spring and autumn. So and I think that's kind of another reason why I do the work I do, because the seasons in the UK are, as everywhere else in the world, completely changing year on year. Summer just seems to be wet majority of the time, a bit warmer, but very, very wet. I think, it's just kind of that reminder of the work we're passionate about.
We have to do, and we're seeing it all around. So, okay, this is amazing. Yeah, I do feel like this podcast could become like basically just kind of an unintentional ad for your hometown or for your current town. But I think, I'm super curious to learn more about, it sounds like you started with a background in brand design and even, like some graphic design and general communications and messaging. And I mean, you're an incredible writer. I've read many of your pieces at this point in research for this conversation, so I'm excited to dive in there too. But talk a little bit about, if you would, just your background before coming into this space. Obviously, your aha moment was maybe when you were younger, but before coming to POW, and then how did you make that transition into POW? And I guess I should also say, I'm throwing around the acronym, but Protect Our Winners is where you work. And that's also been a support of the podcast already. I've done a few projects with them in the US. And so big fan of Protect Our Winners, of course, over here, but really cool to find that you are on the team on the Europe team. So talk a little bit more about your background before you came to POW.
Yeah. So I already touched on it slightly. So when I was volunteering for Surfers Against Sewage, I probably volunteered for about 6 years. And it was actually after my family and we spent a month trip in BC, Canada in 2022. Cool. And it actually gave me the rare chance to slow down and then really actually observe climate change again up close. So I guess this was actually probably another aha moment for me. Obviously, living next to the ocean, switching that for the mountains and the beautiful lakes in BC, it was, there was just a few things that made me really stop me in my tracks. We were there in September, so the seasonal weather was completely out of sync. There were still forest fires, the remains of forest fires, even though we were so deep into autumn. Some trails were still closed due to high risk. We had a truck with like a camper on top, so we had to be really careful when we were going to campgrounds or if we were wild camping not to have any open fires. I think that kind of, there was a couple of other things as well. Like when we spoke to local people, they were really worried and concerned about the bears because they were still being spotted foraging, which was a lot later than normal, which obviously increases the human and wildlife conflict and any disruptions in their hibernation. So it was all these little things. And I'd already been really familiar with POW, following all their content. So when we got back from that trip, I reached out to Protect Our Winters Europe, asked them if they needed any support with anything, happy to volunteer. But obviously we've only got so many spare hours on our plate. So I essentially switched my volunteering from the oceans to the mountains. Wow. Left Surfers Against Sewage and then pretty much started with POW the month after we came back from our trip. Wow. So yeah. And here we are now, 2025.
Yeah, I was going to say, and it's funny because it's not funny, but 2022, I think I wasn't maybe that was the year I moved to California. I can't remember, but I think there was like quite a wildfire. Like that, I think that was because I feel like the last few years, this is where I'm going to be like, I don't really know what I'm talking about. So maybe I shouldn't be talking, but I feel like the last few years, haven't been as like intense of a wildfire season, but I think it was 2022, possibly that was sort of like, 2021, 2022 were like, along the West Coast, there was sort of that. I mean, there's always that fire risk, right?
It's the
At least out west.
inconsistencies.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's the inconsistencies each year. And people, it's like, do people need to prepare for absolutely everything? Like, do they need certain kit bags? Do they need certain precautions in place? It's quite exhausting, like both like physically and mentally.
Definitely.
No matter where you live, like in the UK, as I said, it's very wet. We have a lot of flooding. And it's like, how do people plan? Because you don't actually know when it's going to happen because of
definitely. Definitely. Yeah. I think the the conversation around adaptation and community resilience and preparing oneself for these pieces, like that's always been a really interesting conversation in my opinion, because I think a lot of funding focuses on sort of like, rightfully so, like very useful carbon drawdown and mitigation. But then we need to be talking about adapting or like being prepared for these kinds of things. Exactly what you said, preparing oneself. And I think that's always, it's scary to talk about that, right? Because you have to then, it's almost like maybe admitting defeat is the wrong phrase, but there's an admission of like, okay, things might happen and we have to be ready, instead of it being like, of course I think it's like very useful to have both like optimism and hope, which I know is also like a contentious word in climate, I suppose, but like optimism or, positivity, like we can do something, we've got this. But there is a little bit of, I think there's like a very important aspect to an adaptation mindset where like we also have to understand it's very important, as you were saying, to be prepared for these events, because they're at this point inevitable. Whether or not we're able to reverse things in the future, like that might change possibly. But I think like, I don't know, I'm always kind of like, here and now in 2025, like we still need to be prepared for these events, sadly, like whether we like to admit that or not.
Yes,
it's
absolutely.
It's so tough, I think, to switch that mindset. Okay, so you work for POW Europe. It sounds like there's a lot of different offices or home offices, like work from home folks. But I know that it also seems to be, well, maybe this is sort of a question for you, but like there seems to be folks all over the European continent that work for POW. Is it? And I know, like obviously in general, the US and Europe are sort of structured differently in this way, but it sounds like there aren't necessarily chapters within each country. It's more like everyone kind of ladders up into POW Europe, or how does the structure of the organization in Europe work?
It's actually the opposite. So it's, we do have teams. So we have 10 teams within Europe. So,
Got it.
they will be the specific countries. So I guess for anyone who doesn't really know the entire structure of Protect Our Winters, so founded in the US, they are one team. And then we have other international teams. So Japan, New Zealand, Australia, Canada.
Right.
Then you have Europe. So within Europe, we have our different countries. So Norway, Germany, Italy, France, etc. There's 10 individual satellite teams working on local initiatives, local campaigns, rallying the troops, doing everything they can. They are absolutely amazing.
Wow.
I think the first chapter, oh my gosh, I can't even remember. I think maybe the first chapter started in like 2013 or 14. So there's been some long-standing teams, POW teams. Then POW Europe, so we're then a separate team.
Okay.
We then were founded in 2020. So the idea is we're the sort of umbrella team that holds certain brand partnerships or European level campaigns together. So we would lead on those and roll them out across all the other European teams.
Okay.
So with brand partners, for example, if if you've got a smaller donation and you have quite a big following in Germany, it would make sense. You go straight to POW Germany, do your donation, work with them, get your POW Germany stamp, off we go.
Yeah.
And then if you want to take it another level up, you would then become a European partner. So that's when then you would come to our team. We would then work really closely with you, work out your biggest market. So let's say you've got quite a high following in the Nordic region. We would then work with you, explain where all our chapters are, and then split the donation percentage equally. And if you want to become global, that's when then we work with the US. So we're sort of, also that middle person between the European chapters / teams and the US team. So if you're kind of a bigger paying brand partner, then we would then help that admin and the liaising and all that stuff. Same as with education. POW Europe, we lead on the education programs. And so we then, again, do the admin, roll it out, share all the resources, apply for the funding. Obviously, the local teams, they can also do this. But the idea is if we do it once and then we just replicate it 10 times, it saves so much time. And it also means that we're way stronger as an NGO. And then the same with athletes or creative or science alliance. Each team within Europe, they have their own alliances. But the good thing is with POW Europe, we would then, so a good example of this is recently, at the end of last year, we did a project with Icebreaker, the merino wool brand. We produced a film called Downstream talking about glacier loss and retreat. That meant that we were leading, so POW Europe were leading on the project, but we had to pull on New Zealand because part of the filming was there. We had to pull on the US because part of the filming was there. And then also France. So France recommended the scientist, Juliette. So she featured heavily in the movie. She was the one who told her story of living and being brought up in Chamonix. So lots of collaboration. And it just kind of reminds us how many people are part of our global team and how collaborative we can all be. And just how powerful it can be in getting the message across. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think it's so important to have the global collaboration, the global conversation, because I think, it was interesting because I was curious to hear from you, and there might not be, but I was curious if there were, things you were starting to notice as you lead campaigns in Europe where there might be differences between, and not just the US, of course, I was curious about, are there differences between climate campaigning in Europe and climate campaigning in the US? But you mentioned New Zealand, you mentioned, I think there's, POW Japan. I'm sure there's a wide variety of different cultural contexts. But one thing that's leading to this question is I had a conversation with someone at a brand in Europe who I won't mention in case this person didn't want me to say this, but, or I'll be vague, is, he was noting that the US in the outdoor industry, he felt like the US for so long, which I'm very proud of, is that we've been really focused on inclusivity, equity, access in the outdoor, the outdoor conversation. It's been way more focused on kind of equity, representation. And it has been, and I mentioned, I have another podcast as well called The Trail Ahead, which is actually really around that conversation. It's an interracial dialogue. Myself as a white woman, my co-host as a Black woman, talking about this topic and specifically in a US context. And he was saying Europe is way more focused on sustainability. As brands, he felt like the European context, and he was based in Europe, and he felt like the European context was way more focused on sustainability and environment in the outdoor setting. And I sort of agreed with all of that, but I was curious, if you've seen sort of anything similar, or if there are the differences, any differences you notice between cultural contexts in terms of climate campaigning.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And I think as well, it's just that reminder that within Europe, every single country brings a different culture, brings a different perspective. And we are completely in awe of what all the chapters are doing, because they're all fighting for incredible causes within their local regions. I think what's quite interesting with POW is, because our team was only founded in 2020, what we're finding is how we're carving out the space for POW within Europe. So as a collective of 10 chapters plus POW Europe. And actually some of the work that we're doing will be different to the US. And that's absolutely fine, because then that also shows how we can iterate, how we can be agile as an NGO. And it's I'm going to assume the same as you said in Japan, in New Zealand, in Australia. And I think it's really important, because I think if there was kind of this toolkit or guidebook that anybody who works for Protect Our Winters, we must have these 3 pillars. This is our Northern Star. Everybody, no matter what country you're in, you need to do this. It wouldn't work.
Yeah.
Every government's different.
Yeah.
I just think it's really, really important to give the space to these separate teams. And I completely agree with you. Within Europe, sustainability is so high on the list. There is some amazing things going on. We obviously attend quite a lot of conferences, summits. We actually co-hosted they're in their second, this will hopefully be their 3rd year. So Atomic Ski, we have been co-hosting their Ski Climate Summit for the last 2 years. And it's kind of bringing some of the best hard goods brands into one space for 2 days to ask those kind of uncomfortable questions, talking how they can push more, things like the European Green Deal, how people are addressing that, how people are showing up for that, how that's changing their business models. It's all these things which, it's really inspiring. And there's some really, really great steps being made and some brilliant minds involved in these conversations. And I just feel really privileged that POW is actually one of those organizations showing up and having a voice. Like we've hustled hard, and we've definitely earned that space, but it's, when you sit back and look, very pleasing to see. Yeah.
And well earned, well deserved. I mean, you're leading on so many of these conversations. And I think, this podcast is like very similar in sort of thesis to what POW's doing. But when I looked around the space, when I started this, I sort of said, I think Protect Our Winters is really the only organization that's like at the intersection of true outdoor recreation and climate. And like, there's not a lot of folks doing that. And I remember getting on the phone with Erin early on to talk about this project too. And she said, like, our organization is not like the best named because it's, we want to protect our winters. We also want to protect our planet, right? We want to protect every season and every sport, protect our trails, protect our oceans and surf breaks. So I think, really, really interesting too, what you said about the localization of all these different conversations, because something that's true in Norway is going to be very different from campaigning in Spain, is different from campaigning in Greece. Like, it's like, there's all these different local topics that I think, and I mean, even with, was it Purple Mountains that Jeremy Jones, like the film that POW in the US put out, of like a very localized conversation in New Hampshire, I believe it was, and like and beyond, but sort of again, that ability to drill down, that's a terrible metaphor, to dive deeper into a specific local area. I always do that. I'm like, oh, that's not the right one. It's you gotta find the right metaphor. But to be able to localize it, because I think there's always this actually kind of leads to my next question, but like, I've found that there's a lot of, not to sound too transactional, but sort of this, like, what's in it for me as an audience member, right? And naturally so, like, why should I care about these super, super large scale topics that are extremely amorphous? Even maybe glacier melt and recession might not be like a topic that I relate to because I don't live near a glacier, like that kind of thing. And I think when you can localize it, that's always a really powerful tool galvanizing action, but at that local level. And I was curious, so pivoting a little bit to what you do specifically in messaging and writing. Again, I mentioned, you've written so much on this topic, both about climate campaigning in general, but also just messaging and cutting through the noise, I would say, to get to folks in a really meaningful way. And I was just curious if you could talk more about your experience with like climate writing. And I'm putting that in quotes because I know it's not necessarily like, I don't know exactly how you'd categorize it, but just communicating around climate, which is inherently, I think, a very tough topic for people to kind of grasp. So I know that's your day job or your day to day. So I'm curious, like, how you feel about that.
Yeah, it's definitely tricky at the moment, right? Like with all the things going on with the fact checking, and it's tricky. But I find that if we were to call it climate messaging, it's having that balance between urgency and hope, fear and action. I think one of the biggest challenges is trying to avoid the paralysis, because if the message is too bleak, people will shut down. If it's too soft, they don't act. So I think, within POW, I think that we always start with that connection. So asking the question internally first. So who are we speaking to? What do they care about? How do we make the climate story theirs, not just the planet's? Because that's where the real impact comes from. So I guess an example of this from the Protect Our Winters teams within Europe, we have an annual mobility month campaign, and that is to promote low carbon mobility, which is one of the big things that we stand for within Europe. POW France is doing an absolutely epic job of leading on quite a lot of the mobility work. Super grateful for all the stuff that they do. And I think, so the idea of the campaign is, instead of just telling people to stop flying, instead we share these inspirational stories of people taking low carbon adventures by train or bike, or even foot. They're reminding everyone that you don't need to get on a plane to have an adventure, that low carbon travel is the adventure. Also not feeling like you have to travel miles and miles away. You can have it on your doorstep. Again, it kind of comes back to this mindset shift. But I also think that that's where the tricky balance is, because working with messaging that ultimately gets put out on social media, you're also fighting against the FOMO of people looking at what their friends doing. It's like, I want to go to holiday in Greece. That looks really nice.
Sure.
So I think, like another example would be so this year, the United Nations has declared 2025 as the International Year of Glacier Preservation. So at POW, we've used this to lead in our campaign. We've weaved in our downstream film that we made with Icebreaker, and decided we're going to use bold, emotional language, visuals to communicate the importance of glaciers, the urgency of protecting them. To do that, we've brought in scientists, athletes. Pretty much every POW team globally has taken part. They've shared a piece of content, which is amazing. But the aim was, we wanted to cut through the noise of urgency, and we wanted to give people this clear pathway to act. So the clear pathway being, we're talking about glaciers. And it's been surprising that not a lot of people knew about the glacier retreat, which is quite scary. So I think actually the messaging was really useful. So in that case, it was just the matter of getting it out to as many people as possible. But coming back to the messaging, I believe that tone is everything. And I think in my experience, I find that the climate messaging lands best when it feels human, less corporate, more collective. Using a language that says, like, let's do this together, which is always more powerful than you should do this. Like, nobody wants to be told what to do. You want to be part of something. You want to be part of a team. And I think that's one of the things that Protect Our Winters is really good at. There's an amazing community around it. Everyone is so warm, so welcoming, no matter who you are. You don't even need to be into sports. Everybody is just so welcoming within POW. So I think that's definitely what we try and then do within our messaging. I think when it comes to storytelling, you've obviously got the big hitters like Patagonia, Ben & Jerry's, Nike, they're all leading the way and telling the most compelling stories. And then the product then just sells itself because people have already bought into the messaging. Whether or not it's like circular design, community voices, or systemic change, their good climate messaging should stick, and you should be thinking about it from the moment you read it in days to come.
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting. I was just talking to a team at World Wildlife Fund, actually, in the US about, I don't know if this existed in Europe, but growing up, there was our cartoon, because it was like a couple folks who were around the same age having this conversation. There was a cartoon that we used to play. It was like an ad or a PSA, must have been. We all remembered this cartoon where it was literally like a man in a house, like using running water, and the fish outside in a pond, and the water is going down, like directly linked to how much water he was using. He's brushing his teeth. He's doing a bunch of stuff. And there's like, and you're like watching the fish's water go down essentially. And then I think at some point, the fish goes like, "Hey, turn it off. Like, I'm losing water." And he's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And then the poor fish is sort of like in like an inch of water or something. And I remember, like, I still to this day, we all across the board remembered that. And it was so interesting. Just like that came up for me when you said it should stick. And that was like again, if I can, I'm going to actually try to find it, because I think it's definitely like something that might still exist on the internet maybe. But it really, I think, like, I remember every time I used any kind of water, like growing up, brushing my teeth or, washing dishes, whatever, I always remembered like, oh, the fish, right? Like that was my guy. Like that was who I was sort of like wanting to protect. And I remember it was so effective. But the stickiness of that, to your point, is great. And I think the other piece that you said was, I've also noticed this collective language where, and I noticed it too when talking about like representation and equity. It's the same thing. It's like we have to say we. Like we can't say, or I don't know. I'm always very cognizant of being like, well, you all out there need to do this, and it's because not only does it say, as you said, like no one likes to be told what to do, in maybe, or in kind of this climate context, but also there's this sense of like, well, I'm already doing, it's almost implied of like, well, I'm doing it right, but you need to figure it out. And that's why I like to say, no, it's we. I certainly don't have it figured out. And I want to like go there together, to what you said, like move forward in that same direction together. Because I think because the we, me, or like I versus you, quickly, I also think becomes like us versus them, which is also like what we're experiencing, at least specifically in the US right now. I really think there's like a true us versus them vibe that's really dangerous, and around climate, around politics, around everything. But I think that to your point, like it's as simple as tweaking that language to really bring in a collective moment versus anything sort of like, like coming down on someone or kind of like pointing to someone and saying it's on you to do this. It's like, no, it's actually us. It's we.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really powerful.
Yeah. And that's one of the biggest things within POW. We fully promote imperfect advocacy. Yeah. No one's perfect. And it's just like reminding ourselves, our teams, our community, like, don't pick at each other for doing something. Like, we're all trying our best. Actually, if we come together and go forward as one, it's going to be so much, way, way more powerful than, trying to be the best or like the most perfect human
absolutely
or advocate. Whereas actually, we're all doing the best we possibly can.
Yeah. I was interesting. I was talking on this podcast to Dakota Jones, who's a Protect Our Winters athlete in the US or global. I don't know. He's everywhere these days. He's actually over in Europe right now. So maybe he's a European athlete. But he he was saying similarly, like, I didn't want to stand up on a stage and like talk about my advocacy until I felt like I was perfect and I was doing it right. And I don't know how familiar you are with his story, but he's literally taken he took a ship across the Atlantic to get to Europe for races. He biked to Western states, right. And he biked, I think, to Leadville as well. And he really went hard on a behavior shift that was so extreme because he wanted to. And I'm like, hopefully he's okay with me saying all this for him. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but the idea was I don't feel like I can be a true climate advocate until, I've got everything kind of perfect on my end. Then I can stand up on a stage and tell everyone. And now he says how wrong I was, or how kind of he felt like that shifted for him when he realized that no one else could take a ship or a there's privilege in those behavior shifts being so extreme, right? And that was interesting to talk to him about. But also the sense of he was if I'm, he's I'm never going to be perfect. So is that going to stop me from standing on a stage or being this advocate in front of people? And I think that and he referenced POW too, of this imperfect advocacy, this we're all trying our best. Because I think if we all waited to be perfect to speak, then no one would, or to act, maybe nothing would happen because it's impossible to do that.
It also wouldn't land. It wouldn't land with the average person because you said, it is such a privilege. So for those people who can't financially afford it, physically aren't able to do certain things, then having somebody perfect stand up and tell their story, it wouldn't be relatable.
Yeah,
and that's actually one of the things we do across POW. So with our athletes within Europe, we work really closely with them as they are one of our most powerful storytellers in the climate space. But we also know that just asking athletes to speak up isn't enough. So they need their tools, they need the context, they need the confidence, like you just said, to use their voice in a meaningful way. So what we do, the Europe team, we then work with the chapters to carry out athlete trainings. And we will then focus on things like understanding, that's another thing at POW, we're not the person that should know everything. That's the whole point of collaboration, right? So we work with people that know the most within certain sectors, in certain areas, at certain skills, and we work with them. So the idea is working with the athletes and just giving them a basic understanding of climate policy and the power of personal storytelling, and then supporting them in how they show up, how they use their voice, how do they engage with the media, and then even how to meet with decision makers. Just the more information that they have, then the more confident they will feel, and then their voices can then be projected to the community or on a stage or in parliament, whatever it might be. Because for us, the goal isn't to turn them into a scientist or a policy expert or even an activist. Rather, it's to help them find their way of showing up, using their voice, because they have such a huge influence on the community. Sport is, probably one of the most influential industries on the planet. So whether or not that's sharing their experience of climate change in the mountains or supporting a campaign that we're doing, i.e. Mobility Month, or just having a conversation with a sponsor about reducing their carbon footprint. One of, I think, the best parts of these trainings is how much the athletes actually learn from each other. Because exactly like the example that you said, somebody might be thinking, I can't talk about this because, I had to get that one flight to go to that competition. Whereas actually having an open conversation with people in the same situation as you, I think it's really amazing to see, because it makes them realize that they're not alone. This is the whole point of Protect Our Winters. We want to support them. We want to give them this space. And then they all bring their different perspectives, whether or not that's personal or cultural, but everyone has the same love for the outdoors. So that shared passion is the starting point for the real impact.
Absolutely. That's You said it so well. And I think the other piece too is like, I realized, not everyone obviously is a professional athlete, right? So there's this like, at first I recognize like when I have these conversations with some folks and even mention POW or this project, right? This conversation, this podcast, people are like, oh, well, I'm not a professional. I'm not a hardcore athlete. I even have like, cause the thesis here is also kind of like folks that like to spend time outdoors, as you also said, want to protect it, want to be, advocates and activists for, and I use activist as sort of like lowercase a, like, just activate for climate and for environmental protection. And I think there's just so much around. I always say like, if you like to spend time outside, if you like to sit on a bench and look at the ocean or look at the forest, like if you just like to be in nature, that is outdoor recreation. And yes, these athletes are probably a very extreme version of outdoor recreators and somewhat, the folks who ski big mountain skiing, or mountain biking, champions. It's like you have the extreme versions of these folks, but when they speak up, because as you said, like sport is one of the most influential industries, and I would then say too, as an extension, these athletes are extremely influential in their communities. I think you said that as well. Like, and then when you put that together, sure, you'll have the folks who are like, well, I can't really see myself represented in a pro mountain biker, maybe, but there is a common thread there of like, there's still a love of being outside and being in nature and possibly pushing your body in a certain way that feels good to you. And I think like when you strip all that back, there is this beautiful commonality there of, as you said, like such an influential industry or a community really of people who like to be outdoors. And I always try to like underscore that part because I think it's so common to see people being like, oh, but that's not me. Like, I'm not, I'm not a professional. I'm like, that's okay. Many people are not, like most people are not. And yet you need, it's always helpful to kind of look to those folks who are professionals, because I like what you said too about we're not turning them into scientists or even like official activists per se, but they have a platform and they have a voice. And like, how do you use that voice kind of to like redirect it a little bit?
And then it hits like the different generations, doesn't it? So, yeah. And I think that's the most important thing is the younger generations, if their favorite snowboarder is sharing a personal message about the environment, like that's gonna land with them completely.
Yeah.
And I think again, this is kind of the huge benefit of having these athletes in different countries, including our international countries as well, our international teams, because it's not a copy and paste for any of these athletes because it's all localized. And if you have an Italian athlete sharing about a certain mountain range or a certain area, and one of their followers who is, I don't know, like an 18-year-old kid that has always admired and followed their progression, then that's going to really connect with them. Whereas maybe a US athlete, they love them and they've got a poster of them on their wall, but if they're talking about like an area that's like 20 miles down the road, that's going to have way more of an impact. So I think like this variety is really, really important. And I think from the like results that we've had working with the athletes, they've gone from feeling like really unsure, hesitant, maybe even like not wanting to go on stage to share their story, to actually leading on national media pieces and sitting down with EU policymakers, which is massive, which is, so I feel like we're real supporters in getting them onto another journey in their career, because there's obviously also only so many years of being a competitive athlete or a professional. Right. So actually having this like additional string to their bow is amazing and super beneficial.
Absolutely. And I think you said it, like, again, it's that localization. It's the it's like the immediacy of something that's just down the road that maybe an athlete, you know, again, it's like, I love that too. Like, so you might have someone's poster on your wall, but maybe they don't feel as like accessible or even close. Like maybe they're so far in a different like stratosphere because they're a famous athlete from a different country, but there's something about having someone who might still be like quite famous and well known, but is like, hey, I'm from this area. I'm talking about, you know, I'm talking about this mountain range, or I'm talking about this coastline, right? Like, cause I'm sure, like, I know there's like a really powerful surfer community when surfers speak up about this. And I feel like surfers actually, to the surf community's credit, like, I feel like surfers have been talking about this for a long time, like talking about ocean preservation, conservation, protection for a long time. And I think that like, that has always felt really powerful to me to watch that community like come together around a common cause, but also place, like local coastline. That like I think there's like not many communities, and I would even say this for like a lot of POWs, different athlete communities. There are not many communities that are as like locally passionate and like fervor. Like there's a fervor around like, this is my surf break, and like I will protect it, and like this is something that means so much to me. So yeah, I think it's as you said, it's really important to be able to localize. This word is coming up so much in this conversation, but like, I think it's so true, you know, when you have, and I think the same thing in the US, right? There's sort of state level work happening. And I know POW, it sounds like POW is trying to possibly kind of go deeper on different states and like create more of a hub model in the US, which it sounds like might be actually emulating Europe, which is cool.
Yeah, which is amazing. It's one of the kind of, I guess, like Northern Stars or like the kind of within the next 5-year plan, so to say, because every state in the US is completely different. Yes, you're under one government, but you are still separate states, and that can make a huge cultural shift within the country. So I think it's really exciting for POW US. I think it's going to be, it's definitely the step in the right direction. And it's definitely showing in Europe, because exactly what you said is there are the teams on the ground, like POW Austria, for example, they are doing some amazing work and going to specific, areas and regions. So there was a campaign piece or a PR piece. They held a glacier funeral. Honestly, I'll have to get the link to you. It was incredible. It's probably one of the most successful PR pieces we've had come out of Europe. I'd say.
I got goosebumps when you're talking about this. I haven't seen this yet.
It was really, really great. And so it's like more of that stuff needs to happen to really connect the community with the planet and the natural environment that's around them.
Yeah. And the stickiness, right, to your point before, like it sticks. That's something I haven't even seen it yet, but it's already like, I know it sticks in your brain. And I think that what you said too about the US state level, like I'm just sort of chuckling to myself, and the chuckle is like a way to cope with what's happening. So it's like so devastating right now in our country, but like, it's like, I think, you know, to use the cliche, like now more than ever, we actually need to be looking at the state level. Cause I think that in the US, cause that's kind of like where I think the most change will happen. So, I so appreciate your work on, you know, what you're doing in POW Europe, because it's such a cool thing to see the extension of what like, I guess started in the US, we could say, but like, obviously to your very cool background in volunteering with Surfers for Sewage. Was it the organization?
Surfers Against Sewage.
Surfers for Sewage. That's probably not the right way to say that. Surfers for Sewage. Yeah, great. Surfers Against Sewage. Yeah, again, another not the right language on that. But like that's so like you've been doing this for so many years. Like, you know, that's kind of, and it's so cool to see that folks' passion for this that have started when maybe they were their children, like in, you know, kind of earlier years, to be able to harness that into what has become POW Europe, POW New Zealand, POW Japan, POW, I didn't know there was specifically POW Canada, which is actually very interesting because it's so close to us, and I haven't even like activated that community either. Before we wrap, I wanted to ask you, Jordan, I know that in some of my research for this conversation, I found that, you have honestly had quite a journey in your life with a condition. Actually, I don't even know. I don't want to put any words in your mouth, but I was really curious. It seems like it's really impacted the way that you live your life. And I'm just really admiring of you for that and for communicating about it as you have. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about your experience and sort of how it's led to this idea that like I read, doing something that scares you every day or really like living life to the fullest. And clearly you do. That is no lie. That is very apparent. But I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about your journey there.
Yeah, so I was actually born with a benign collection of abnormal blood vessels on the left side of my face. Essentially, it's called a hemangioma, but essentially it was like a tea bag that was covering under my skin. Was told it was very common. Was told it's especially common in infants, and it typically shrinks over time. So basically, throughout my whole childhood, I was under observation, regular medical checkups. And it wasn't actually until I moved to Wales. So it's really weird how this journey has unraveled, because if my sister and I didn't persuade my parents to move to West Wales, this wouldn't have been picked up by my GP, my new GP. Because then he immediately referred me to one of the main hospitals in Wales for further investigations. So this was at the age of 14. I don't know, what made him do it, because I was fit, healthy, nothing apart from looking like I had like an abscess, like my face was quite swollen. Apart from that, there was no major red flags. But just something obviously just didn't sit right with him. And it's really funny because that GP is my now partner's dad. So it's really strange how it's all happened.
Oh my gosh.
Really, really funny, but also very, very special.
Yeah.
So anyway, 3 years later, at the age of 17, I then am going in for surgery. So things had obviously progressed, and again, no major red flags. It was described that the surgery would be cosmetic, to reduce my face from looking slightly larger on the left side. But then a few hours later into surgery, everything completely changed. I was told if I hadn't had the surgery, I wouldn't have actually made it to my next birthday, that the growth was suffocating the oxygen going to my brain. So when I came round, all I remember was being hooked up to like so many machines, so many IV drips coming out of me. I had an 11-inch wound from like up here right down to my neck. So it was pretty wild. Everything was like stapled up. And I think it was, probably for about a year afterwards, there was just more and more things that came out that if I hadn't have had it, I wouldn't be here today. So luckily they're confident they removed about 90% of the malformation during surgery, because during surgery, they had to stop the procedure because they just couldn't stop the bleeding. They were basically trying to cut it away and lost so much blood that they had to just stabilize me from worsening. It's still like I have to still be monitored every year to make sure it's not growing back. And obviously I think about like what is remaining inside me and where is that growing? Like, is that creeping into the brain still? But I think instead of having that as a negative, like completely flipping it on its head and having it as a positive, because I might not have made my next birthday, but I did. And actually being there for every birthday since is just like a huge celebration. And I think I'm really glad I nearly died, because I have heard of these people that referred to this feeling of gratification, overcoming like a life-threatening illness. And I completely get it.
Wow.
Because when you're faced with death, it completely shakes your world up and it really changes your perspective on life. So yeah, that was a huge pivotal moment. And I don't think I really realized it at the time because I was only 17. And
sure,
the thing on my mind at the time was like, oh my God, because after surgery, there was so much nerve damage. And you can even tell now, like I can't smile on this side. And I don't think, well, I'm now 34. So I've been like this for quite a while. So the muscles aren't going to come back. But that's just like one tiny slice of the pie when it actually comes to the bigger picture. And I think, it's just that reminder that life is so, so precious and anything could happen to anyone. And it comes back to that doing one thing that scares you each day. I try and absolutely make the most of it. I think everyone who I know thinks I'm completely exhausting and I don't know how I fit so many things into my day, week, year. But I think we just all need to completely grab life.
Yeah.
And run with it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Jordan, thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, I think like I was very eager to ask you about this because when I read your piece, I realized like I think a lot of people can hear, or like I think a lot of people maybe need to hear this. Like I need to hear that from it's just important not to forget like what we have and what the beauty of current situations, even when challenging, like there is still something to learn from everything. And also kind of the, like, as you said, grab life and run with it because life is short and delicate and fragile, and sort of this like amazing sense of overcoming what you did and also like living, to more birthdays and like working on what you work on and putting that passion into work and also play. Like it sounds, I can definitely imagine you're like, oh, I'm going to go surfing. And everyone's like, what, how do you have the energy? Like, how do you have the time and energy to do, surfing, hiking, trail running, and being just out in the world and also working so hard on what you're working on. So, with POW. And I think, I really appreciate you sharing that because even though what a quote, like, I'm glad I almost died, I think is what you said, or something to that effect. I mean, like that's really powerful. So thank you for sharing. And also glad that you are also, of course, still with us. And, it sounds like it might be easy or simple to talk about now, but like, I'm sure it's not easy to talk about ever because there's like a challenge, with, I don't know, like it just, that kind of experience, as you said, like you're 17, you don't know necessarily like that's the day that might change things. Yeah,
exactly. And you don't really appreciate, you can't appreciate how big of a thing it is. Like, I know it was really disruptive for my family, but actually it wasn't until I was, obviously affected me in various ways, but I think it kind of shook me up again. So I've got a 6-year-old son.
Yeah.
So when I was pregnant with him, I had to go to the hospital that I had the operation in, check in with my consultants to make sure everything was okay. Because obviously in pregnancy, you've got so much more blood going around your body. And my face, like it didn't feel right. I felt like there was something different about it. So they had to just monitor me. And it was just that kind of like reminder of, I need to be careful because like when it comes to things like this, and if there is something that doesn't feel right, then I should probably flag it now. But it was the reminder in terms of like what's going on with me, but also the reminder of like, okay, let's keep pushing and bring a life into the world, which is amazing. And
yes, it is amazing.
And I'm just super, super fortunate because people don't get this opportunity to just be as lucky as I have been. And also, I think it's just recognizing that no problem is too small either. Like everybody has something going on, whether or not it's like them directly or someone that's really close to them. And I think it's recognizing that. And yeah, maybe someone might resonate with what I'm saying, but then think, oh, but my situation wasn't as extreme as this one. But it doesn't matter, because everyone's scale is different and comparison is completely the thief of joy. So, so I think everybody's got their own scale. And I think it's just recognizing that and appreciating what people are going through and just listening.
Yeah. Everyone has their stuff. Like everyone, there's stuff going on behind the scenes that we don't know about. And I appreciate you sharing both of, like saying that too, because I think, there probably maybe are folks listening who are like, well, my problems don't matter. Like that's the real, like she went through some, but you're right. Like, so it's like both of those things. It's like grab life and run with it. Like take every opportunity, do something that scares you. And also like your issues and problems and challenges are real, like everyone's going through their own thing. And so it's, I appreciate both of those, because I think that it's easy then maybe to, for someone to hear that. I mean, but I also do think like hearing your story does put things in perspective. Like for me, even like as I'm hearing your story, I'm like, oh, well, like not to minimize my own stuff, but there is a little bit of context shifting, perspective shifting that happens when, I hear something like that, because it does, I mean, like a friend of mine recently was he's fine, his partner's fine, but they were in a car accident, and immediately like he was sort of like dealing with things at work and dealing with things, and he's like, Addie, it doesn't matter. Like not that it doesn't matter, but like I'm alive. Exactly, I am so fucking grateful to be alive. Like it was a real shift, and I think even hearing his story also helped me to see, again, it's sort of it shifts perspective. So,
it's hard though, isn't it? Because when you're in it and like, it's a little bit groundhog and you're just getting frustrated with the small, the small things going on.
Sure.
It's, having that check in with yourself, get out in nature, go and do something fun, go and do something for you.
Yes.
Because actually, that thing may not be as big as it feels in that moment.
Totally. And I think like, and I mean, that brings it back to a lot of our themes of talking about like things like waves and glaciers and mountains and oceans. Like I think that's also one of the things that feels powerful about nature to me. And even working on these topics is that it takes me out of myself, if that makes sense. Like it brings me into this sense of like, there are these things that are that's why I think like I love climbing big mountains or seeing kind of large scale natural things, is because there's a sense of like the world is so much bigger than or like even my brain, is sort of this tiny thing that like, not to diminish anything, but it really does shift perspective of like these larger forces at play. And, climate, what happens to be one of those things, but that it's like, there's things larger than me that like, I want to go work on, that's kind of the impetus there. But at the same time, not to like diminish. So I really appreciate you pointing out both of those sides. Cause I think a lot of times it's so easy to be like, oh yeah, like it doesn't matter at all. It's like, it matters. And it's also not as maybe big as we feel or something like that. So yeah, but thank you so much for sharing that. And, props to you too. I know like you wrote the piece that I read that I found through by digging a little bit. I know it sounded like, you don't necessarily share that all the time. So I really appreciate you both sharing it there, and also here, for people to hear and just absorb and, maybe apply it to their own lives as like that principle of sort of like grabbing a hold of life a little bit more and running with it. And also like doing things that you love, getting outside, making time and space in your day for enjoying nature or enjoying the things that you love, because, it is a good reminder that like life is very precious. So, thanks. Yeah. Thank you for that, Jordan. I really appreciate you sharing.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Addie. Really appreciate it.
Because of time, I'm going to ask you the last question that I ask everyone on this podcast, which is curious, what is your favorite climate solution that is not your own? Maybe not POW or even not like communications campaigning. What is a climate solution that you're seeing in the world that you're really psyched on?
Yeah. This is probably going to feel quite. I'm going to go with like a really simple solution.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, I feel like
it's open to any interpretation. Whatever you want.
Well, seeing as also if I'm the first European on the podcast, let's bring it back to like a UK feel. So one of my favorite brands, Finisterre, they're a UK brand, started in Cornwall, and their commitment to circular design has been with their repair services, take-back schemes, design for recyclability. These three things are weaved into their brand storytelling. They've got, beautiful brand, really good messaging. And that's what connects people with their emotions when it comes to nature, their belonging, their responsibility to the planet, etc. So I think in an industry that often drives consumption, this approach really shows how brand strategy and culture can drive genuine climate action. So one of the things that Finisterre has led on, they've led on a wetsuit innovation with Ulex, which is a natural rubber that produces 80% less carbon dioxide. I think
it's seaweed based, right? What is Ulex? Is it like a natural substance?
Yeah, I'm not sure on the exact material.
I'll look that up too. Yeah,
combination, but and I'm sure it uses 10 times less water in production than traditional neoprene.
Wow.
So they've done that, and then actually most recently, I think it was maybe last month, they have launched. Actually, let me rewind. They have been collecting over they've been collecting wetsuits and have collected over 1,000 used wetsuits from their community. And last month, they actually made and launched their first wetsuit recycling changing mat, completely made of recycled wetsuits. So something just so simple, but also ties in with the brand. They can share the message, they can tell the story. And for a product that's estimated, I think it's like over 8,000 tons of old wetsuits end up in landfill every year, which is absolutely ridiculous. And due to their like complex material structure, it's actually impossible to recycle them. So like actually break them down and turn them into, say, another wetsuit. So doing something like this, I just think is super wise, and kudos to Finisterre for all the work they're doing down there.
That's okay. This is very cool to hear about, because I came in touch with that brand. Like I've seen them sort of like online, various Instagram ads and etc. And then my partner and I were in London last year, and we were staying essentially, like, we didn't know this, but across the street from one of their stores. I don't know how many stores they have in London, but like maybe one, I don't know. And we walked in and I was like, I think maybe. And we walked in and I was like, do I need to be a surfer on the coast of the UK? Like, this is the coolest. Because it's like they do such a good job, to your point, storytelling, visually, even like culturally. I felt like, oh, this is a community I want to be a part of. And I actually did grow up a little bit, very baby surfing in Maine, like very, very, very limited and like small waves and everything. But like love cold water, like kind of get invigorated by the cold water surfing culture even too. And I know we just both were like, is this the coolest store we've ever been in? Like, this is awesome. And I actually didn't know. I knew that they had quite a strong sustainability bent, but I actually didn't know about these initiatives that they're doing. So that's really cool. Yeah. Shout out to them for sure.
Yeah. They're doing all sorts of great stuff down there. So it's one of those small but mighty teams. So definitely check out the other stuff they're working on.
Yeah, I will definitely link to that too. Are they from like where kind of like the coast of Wales then? Or like, are those photos Like, no.
So they're down in Cornwall. So
Okay. Okay.
They're in England.
I see. Okay. So this is where I need to pull out my map and get my geography right. Okay. Got it.
They're on the West Coast, though. We're on the same.
Okay. All right. Same coast.
Edge of the UK.
That's helpful. Yeah. Good for the American to like get a lay of the land. Oh, that's so cool. I love that. And not necessarily simple at all. Like very, very powerful. And I think I will say like one last thing. Shout out to the European community in general for, I think, driving circularity personally. Like, I think there's been like a massive example set by like, actually like way back when, a couple of years ago, did a little bit of work with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, was like a very big fan of what they were starting to talk about. But again, it was like, we're not starting to talk about, they were already talking about it, but it was sort of like, how do we bring that to the US context? And I think that it hadn't really tipped in the US yet. And I think it has now, maybe, but like it's been really cool to follow the lead, I think, of like the European context for circularity, circular design, the sort of like anti-take, make, waste, like very much like how do we design back into, design these pieces, especially hard goods or whatnot, like physical products back into their own system. So yeah, anyways, very cool. shout. Yeah.
It's like a cross collaboration needs to happen, and like, the work needs to be shared.
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, thank you for being, I feel like I'm launching a lot of like European wide sort of statements to you, but you are again, like my big reference point to the whole continent right now for this podcast. So, but Jordan, thank you so much for your time. I really, really enjoyed talking to you, getting to know you. I feel like, seeing bits and pieces of posts in the world from you around kind of protect our winners, I was like, this girl is cool. Like I want to get to know her better. So yeah, thank you for the work that you do. And I hope someday we get to, I just recently joined the Creative Alliance at POW to do this, kind of with this project. And so I'm hoping someday our paths cross, because it'd be great to meet in person, and yeah, we'll see if we can make it happen.
Yeah. Have to, let's definitely make that happen.
Yeah. Sounds good. Thank you so much, Jordan. I appreciate it.
Amazing. Thank you so much.